Alright, welcome back. As promised in the last video, I said I was going to make another video to show you how to pair the eyes together. Pairing the eyes, the technique that I'm going to be showing you today only works if the image that you're looking at is a straight on view, like this one. Okay, if it's a 3/4 view or a side view, these measurements will not work. So make sure that when you're practicing, find a model, find a photograph that the picture is looking straight at you. Okay. All right, let's get to it. All you need for today is a scrap sheet of paper like this with a straight edge, your regular paper, and your drawing pencil. We're going to focus on placement of the eyes. We're not going to worry too much about the shading or anything because we did that on the last video. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to take a scrap sheet of paper with a straight edge, or you can do this with a ruler, and you just want to draw a horizontal line where you want the eyes to be. Okay, so that's step number one. Now, before we do the vertical line, what I would recommend is that on your scrap piece of paper, decide how big you want the eyes to be. So let's say that I want the eyes to be this big. Then I want to find the center. So the center is right about there. If you need to, use a ruler. I'm going to switch. So make sure that you have your center. Okay. Now, draw a 90-degree line from the horizontal line. Okay. Again, keep these lines relatively light. I'm drawing them a little extra hard because I notice on some of my videos I draw light and my guidelines don't show up. But this is the location of the nose, the center of the mouth, the center of the chin, and the center of the lips. So, next thing that you want to do is you want to line up your center to that little tick mark right there, and I want you to mark the inside of each eyes. So this is this space right here. For right now, we're leaving that blank. Okay. Then scoot this over. This is going to be the location of that eye. Scoot this all the way over here, and that will be the location of this eye. Now, keep in mind that these measurements are going from tear duct to tear duct. So when you start drawing the ball, make sure that you leave a little space here for the tear duct. So if you want to put them in first. So now I can start working on the circle. And remember that tear duct is not in the middle. So when I draw my circle, I'm not putting it on this center line. And draw it lightly because, as you guys know, when we put the skin on this, you're not going to see a lot of this. Space in here, space in here. If you need to check the height, you can do that. So like this one here is taller than the other one, but this one looks more correct to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark this here so that I can adjust this circle here. And I just want to take it up right up to that edge. Alright, so that looks pretty good. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to decide what the iris and the pupil are doing. So, are they looking at you? Are they gazing to the right or to the left? For this one, I'm just going to have it gazing at us. And then the second one, I will change the direction of the gaze. So this is similar to the first lesson that we did on these eyes. It's a little high there. So, pupil in the center, pupil in the center. And when I'm drawing a pair of eyes, I like to work on both of them at the same time. That way there's some consistency to them. Okay, the next thing is I want to put in the iris. And remember that this pupil needs to be centered on the iris. And again, if you need to check the height, you can just scoot it over like that. I prefer to do it freehand, but it's totally up to you. So I'll draw it freehand and then I'll check it. And if it looks off, then I will fix it. So let's take a peek. So the height on that looks pretty good. And that looks pretty good. Okay. The rest of it is the same as what we did on the last lesson. Is just deciding, by looking at your reference material, is what the eyelids are doing, upper and lower, what the eyelashes are doing, what the eyebrow is doing. So I'm just going to look at this picture here. I'm going to have it off camera so you can see. So in this case, the tear ducts on her are actually coming up a little bit like this, and then they drop down well below the iris, and then up just above this little center area here, just like so. Now remember that on this side you're not going to see the ball, the eyeball. On this side you will, the edge. So we can see the thickness of the lid. Now her eyes are they're kind of heavy. They're covering a lot. In fact, her eyelid on the upper part is actually touching part of the pupil. So it's way up here. And I'm going to mark that. It's got like a slant coming down this way. And then it turns into that. And then on this side it continues past this little edge here. Like so. Now on her, we cannot see the thickness of the lid on the top. We can only see the thickness of the lid on the bottom. Okay? So I'm going to try to do the other eye. And her eyes are pretty symmetrical. So here we go. This part goes in just a little bit. Then it drops down well below the iris down here. And slightly above this tick mark here. And clearly on this one you can really see that the thickness of the eyelid. And on the top part they're actually very similar. This one here is actually a little bit lower than the other one on the photograph. So it's actually like right here. It drops almost straight towards that tear duct on this side. Then it drops past this edge here. Now before I do the eyelids or the crease of the eyelid, I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of some of this stuff just to make it easier for you guys to see. But okay, so that looks pretty good there. Again, if you need to check, don't be afraid to use your straight edge or a ruler to check your progress, right? Because you don't want to be drawing like one eye that's way high and one eye that's way low or something like that. Also make sure that your spacing looks good. Okay, for this eyelid crease, there's actually quite a bit of a distance between this edge and this edge on her. So it's right about here. But then as it starts to come towards the tear duct, it actually starts to get a little thinner, like so. So the spacing here is nowhere near as big as it is up here. And then on this side, from the photograph, it actually stops right about there. It does not go past the eyeball like on some other pictures that I've seen. So it's about there. On the other side, I'm looking and it actually starts right about here. And the spacing is similar to the one on this side, just a tiny bit shallower. And on this one, it doesn't curve as much. It's almost not quite a straight edge, but there's a flatness to it here, and then it drops down on this side, and then on this side it does curve. So this side is a little bit more geometric than that side. This one has a smoother curve than this side. And again, that's one of the reasons why when you're practicing, that you have to look at the individual, right? And make sure that you are drawing what you actually see, not what you think the eye should look like. Okay. For her eyebrows, show you her eyebrows here for a minute. Here's the tear duct. Her eyebrows are actually way over here on both sides. So I'm going to go up from the tear duct, but then I'm going to come over, up from the tear duct and over. So she's got very, very thick eyebrows, and they're relatively close to this crease right here, and they're angled right about like this, and then they kind of disappear. They actually go past her eye, and they disappear behind her hair, and they have like this uniformity to them, so they don't have like a sharp edge like some of the other pictures that we looked at. Okay. Same thing on this side, pretty close. So I'm just gonna go this way, relatively straight, and it goes past the eye. Very, very thick, very long eyebrows. And then underneath on her, we can see just a little bit of the bags underneath her eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Not that much. She's young, so these bags, they don't really show up that much. But when you're shading, you're going to notice that it is a little bit darker. As I mentioned before, though, I'm not going to be doing the shading on this. I just wanted to show you how to do the layout. And there you have it. The rest of this is all about shading and then putting in the details. And just like I mentioned on the previous video, make sure that you are paying attention to all the little subtle changes in the shading. So for example, here, the darkest part of her eyes are going to be the pupil, and right here at the base of these eyelashes on both sides. And her eyebrows are very dark in this area, but then they'll get a little bit lighter here, a little bit lighter here. Okay, a lot of midtones, and then you can actually see some areas of highlight. Okay. So I'm gonna let you guys do the shading. I really wanted to focus on how to do the placement so the eyes look like they belong together. So on the second one, I'm just going to show you how to do the same thing, but this time with the eyes going in a different direction, or not going in a different direction, but the gaze is going to be in a different direction. And I'm going to change the size of the eyes too, so you can see that this is actually pretty easy. So I'm just going to draw my horizontal line first. Then let's make a bigger eye. So I'm going to go with a pretty big eye. And this one's pretty big, so I'm actually going to figure out where that center line is, right about there. If you need to verify, use a ruler. The reason that I want to show you this, because you always want to find those 3 marks, even if the gaze is not looking straight at you. Okay, so first, let's figure out where the eyes are going to be. So remember that this space stays open. Okay. So just to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to extend these lines up a little bit. For those of you in my class, I gave you a worksheet that shows you the spacing of the eyes, spacing of the nose, spacing of the lips, and all that. But for this particular video, we're only focusing on this. Okay, remember that the tear duct is here. So I'm going to put a mark here and a mark here about the same. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw a nice big circle. because this eye is much bigger. So I'm just going to draw this big circle here. Eventually, you'll be able to do a nice pair of matching eyes without actually drawing the entire eyeball. But when you're first starting out, I recommend that you do this, especially when you're changing the direction of the gaze, because that's when it becomes a little tricky. If you start off with the eyelids and then try to fit everything inside. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Remember that this is the tear duct. Okay. Now, I don't want the tear duct, and actually that's okay here. I put it below center, but if I thought the tear duct was too close to center, I would just drop another line here just to lower it. But this is below center, so we're okay. So now let's say that I want the eyes looking this way. The big thing here, excuse me, is that the iris and the eyeball, excuse me, the iris and the pupil have to match, just like we did on that first video. So match them up because they move together. Right? When you move your eyes, the iris and the pupil always move together. Okay, because this is in different direction, this is actually going to be a circle, or excuse me, an oval, not a circle. So a circle in perspective is an oval. If you need to match the size, you could do that. Okay, use as many different guidelines as you feel you need. Okay, then the pupil. So the pupil has to be centered on here. Remember that center in perspective, and it's going to be an oval. Okay, they look pretty good. Let's double check. This one's a little small, so I'm just going to bring it down just a little bit more. And checking the top. And when I'm checking the top, I'm just putting this line parallel to this one. So the top looks good. That was the bottom was a little off. So I need to move this down just a little bit also to make sure that they're center. Okay. Okay. The rest is just like we did here. So starting with the tear duct. Then, depending on how the eyes look, in this case, because the eyes are looking downward and to the right, or my right, it's going to cover part of the iris. And the thickness. And then the top. And because of the way that she's these eyes are looking, you're actually not going to see. You're seeing a lot of the iris on the top this time instead of the bottom, because of the gaze, the direction of the gaze. So, eyelid, and then the eyebrow. And on her, it doesn't curve as much. It's got that long, almost parallel very long, very thick eyebrows. So I'm just going to darken this up so that you can actually see a little bit that the process, if the person is in a straightforward look, right, In other words, the face itself is facing us. You can change the gaze of the eyes. It's okay. Now, if the face was a 3/4 view, where the face is actually turned, then you can't use these measurements. You have to do perspective, and we're not really going to do that in this video. This is just to show you a frontal view, because that's what we're using in our project in class. And that's it. Give this a try. It's actually pretty easy. The big thing is that make sure that you do some measurements, okay? If you don't, you're going to wind up making the eyes too close together, too far apart, or one too high, one too low, or you're going to mess up the angles of the eyes. I've seen all of that. So, but by doing these few little steps first, it actually solves all that. It gets rid of all those little mistakes. All right, so here's an example of what the finished product should look like after it's been shaded in. So if you need help with the shading, just check out the previous video that I did on the eyes, and it'll take you step by step. But you'll notice the spacing is still there, and then the highlights are coming, the light source is coming from this direction here. And the big thing to remember is when you are shading, make sure that you are doing the shadings to give three-dimensionality to the eyes. Pay attention to the light source. Make sure that you have bright highlights, deep shadows, and all your midtones. And I would highly, highly recommend that you do all of the shading before finishing up with the eyebrows and the eyelashes. Okay? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.